Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of the Kitabi Karwan podcast. Today we have with us Ashwiny Iyer Tiwari, the celebrated filmmaker, producer, and now a writer as well. Ashwini has not only made some of my favorite films, such as Bareily Barfi, but has also directed some critically acclaimed works such as Panga and, of course, Nilbate Sannata. A couple of years ago, she forayed into the beautiful world of writing by publishing her first book, Mapping Love. And today we talk to her about, well, let's not give a lot of it away, but the journey of a creator who creates across mediums and the importance of writing and, in fact, reading in her beautiful world. Let's jump right in. Hi, Ashwini. Welcome to the Kitabi Karwan podcast. I'm really glad to have you on, not just as an author, but also because you've made one of the film that I've loved over the past 5, 6 years, Bareily Ki Barfi, which is something really close to my heart. I absolutely loved that movie, and I absolutely loved your book. Especially, I think the name of your character, Urja, it kind of really, I don't know. There's no particular reason that I can even come up with. It just was a very appealing, especially the slightly different spelling that you added to it. Uh, but something that I realized, I was talking to a few of my friends who were also fans of cinema, particular Bollywood cinema, and reading as well, and they were slightly surprised at the fact that a director also was writing a book when it kind of popped up. So, which actually got me thinking, right? Because I mean, at the end of it, cinema and writing are just two different art forms expressed in two different ways. But somehow there's always this apprehension or this, I don't know, idea that one medium won't be able to be replicated in the other, which I personally didn't feel so. But what's your take on this? Do you think that did you face this block when you were going ahead with this thing, or did you feel that, I mean, it just felt like a natural flow from one to the other?
I feel that any creator who wants to express their ideas and thoughts into any medium can literally have a say on what kind of story do they want to say, in which medium they want to say it. Not every director is a writer, not every writer is a director, and there are writers and directors, and there are also artists who are directors, like painters, and there are creators who are directors, and vice versa. So a creative person, there are music directors who are directors, and editors who are directors, and it can just go on and on. So I think it would be very unfair for all of us to stagnate the process of a creator by putting self-imposed thoughts in ourselves that we can only do so much, and if this is
Right,
something which we have done, which means we cannot be writing or we cannot be directing. I know a
right.
lot of novelists who have written books and now who want to direct,
Mm-hmm.
and who also want to write a screenplay. Maybe the method of writing is different,
Mm-hmm.
but the process of creating a story is the same. So
Right.
for me, that is what gives me joy. And of course, you have your trial and errors, and there is something about learning. And for me,
Mm-hmm.
I feel that I'm a forever learner. So even if I've made 10 films, for me my 11th film will be like, oh my god, I need to start from the beginning. I need to learn. I
Right.
need to do my research work. I need to have my process ready. For every creator, I do feel that the it's not what you're saying, it is how you're saying it. And for me, that is very important, is because every medium is different. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're writing a screenplay, you are writing what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
but the story is the same, the beats are the same,
Right.
and you write it in limited words, with only writing beats of what you're going to be seeing on in the theaters. But when you're writing a novel, you're writing to feel.
Right.
And what happens is that, and again, there is individual reading, there is individual viewing, and there is collective viewing.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, with the OTT platforms coming in, it is a lot of individual viewing also. So
Right.
what you see and what you take will be very different than what I see and what I take. A book is
Mm-hmm.
very similar, is that when you're
Right.
reading, you're feeling some thoughts and something you will resonate with, which is like one of the first few points which you said was the name Urja.
Mhm.
And this is a very new perspective for me, is because not many people have actually spoken about the name Urja and Anang, and I had put in a lot of effort on why I kept her name Urja and why I kept his name Anang. Is
Right.
because Urja means fire, Urja means a lot of energy,
Mhm.
and the energy in her had to be disposed somewhere in some form of what was going through her as a
Right.
as person, as in with her relationship with her mother, her relationship with her father, her relationship
Mm.
with the many guys she had in her life, and also her relationship with life itself. So
Mhm.
for me, those things mattered a lot, and also her journey from one place to the other, and then when she meets Anang, what is her thought of
Right.
expression, what is she going to say? So for me, in any of my movies also, what
Mhm.
name I give to my characters is something which is very important. It's just that in here, when I was writing Mapping Love, it was a pure the journey of writing a novel is far more different than the journey of writing a screenplay, is because I do feel screenplay is still you write, and then it is uh, a lot more collective. There
Mhm.
are a lot more people involved,
Right.
right, to have a very subjective and concrete point of view on what we write, is because your three act will be the same, but still, how you write
Right.
it, what you do, how are we jumping from one scene to the other is very important. But in a novel, the beauty about writing a novel is that
Mm.
you can jump from anywhere to anywhere, and it is purely your
Uh,
writing. It
Right.
is you. It is your responsible till the end. Your publisher is there. Your publisher helps you. Your editor helps you to navigate your thought process.
Right.
They help you, give you the right feedback.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it is you who are writing, and it is your thought process, and it is what
Right.
you are feeling.
Right.
And that feeling across the pages, you will like one page, and you will like a word from one page, and maybe like some sentences from one page,
Right.
and I may just oversee that, and I may like something else. And even if I do not, I have a beginning and I have an end, and there's no middle
Mhm.
anywhere, and the middle has gone somewhere else. Till the time you justify your writing
Right.
in your novel and you know exactly what you want to do, the end of objective of each of your mediums has to be known correctly. Then a
Right.
writer can, and I would say not a writer. I think we should just term all ourselves as creators, because you
Right.
love movies. You watched Bareily Ki Barfi. You said that it was one of your favorite films. Now, as
Mhm.
a creator, as someone who is interested in books, you have a part of you which is a creator, and I
Right.
feel all creators can dabble into all kinds of mediums, and
Absolutely.
it is very important to explore that.
Mhm.
Explore at least once in your lifetime, and maybe it will work, maybe you will fail, maybe I always got into the intent of writing a book is because I always wanted to write a book. I also remember that when I used to write
Right.
screenplay and the storyline, I used to write it like a novel, and I was
Right.
told, can you like just keep it to the
The
point?
point.
Like, because your screenplays go to 125 pages, and
Right.
you do a count on FDX, you do literally a count of the pages, and you
Page.
know how many minutes is going to be each scene. And when you're doing that calculations, like, Ashwini, I think your screenplays are too long. I explained everything. And then
Right.
that kind of realizes that beauty and that joy you get when you're writing a book.
Right.
But the medium of writing a screenplay is very different, is because what clothes she's going to wear, he's going to wear, or what thought processes is already always going to be seen. It's not going
Right.
to be um, and when you see the really the masters of filmmaking like Satyajit Ray,
Mhm.
he was a very good artist. He was an ex-advertising person, and he was a very good artist. He used to illustrate his storyboards, and he
Right.
used to see films through the point of view of art. And so, his cinematography, the way he looked at things, the way he looked at beauty in his characters was his eye.
Right. Right.
So, yes,
But
so
Ashwini, I actually had a question on this, right? The fact that, I mean, this is, I'm very surprised to hear this. this confession, if I may, that you always wanted to write a book, right? And I mean, I get it. I mean, every author always wants to, but and this interesting bit that you pointed out, that we should be looking at, uh, let's say, all artists as creators, like not as writers, directors, and their individual silos in which we might classify them, which is true, which I agree to this point. But then I think we do reach a question wherein a question must be asked: how does a creator decide which medium is the best one to express it as? Right, you mentioned you've written screenplays which read like novels, right? They're too detailed, like just as a book is, right? You can take 3 pages to kind of set the scene, you know, what you're smelling and what you're looking at and how the flowers are and how the sky is. While in a screenplay, it's like required to be a little to the point, and I mean, and you fairly point out that with an OTT, there's this element of individual viewing, but most largely till like a few years ago, before OTT took off, it was a collective viewing experience which you kind of had to be taken into account for. I mean, if I could sum it up in one question, like why was Nilbatte Sonata a movie and not a novel, right? Why would that? How does that distinction click in your head that, you know, when you have an idea as a creator, and okay, so how do you kind of go ahead? Okay, I'm going to make a movie out of this, or a short film out of this, or I'm going to write a novel or a short story. How does that work?
So, Nilpati Sonata was always a movie, and also,
Right.
I think I'm going back to a question, question which you said before, is
Mm-hmm.
that as creators, yes, we are creators, but we need to know how good we are at whatever we do.
Mm-hmm.
I have I have written screenplays, but in screenplays, the language of writing is not as important
Okay.
as a novel, and I was not sure about myself, about my language, and the kind of prose, or the confidence, actually, to write a novel. It's not an easy process,
Right.
especially if you're writing a fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always learned that whatever I do, I need to make sure that if I'm not very good, I at least be good at it.
Right.
If you're not very sure about it, for just for having a tag that you have written a novel doesn't work for me.
Right.
So these are all things which you explore, you evolve with time, you evolve with maturity. And Mapping Love was something which I felt that can be written into a book, and now who knows, I'll make it into a film.
Right.
So and
That'd be nice.
I and maybe I would not write the screenplay, because the kind of comments which I had got when the book was getting uh, we had book critics and even cinema critics who were reviewing the book, reviewers. It said that it would be a damn good film,
Right.
and I
I
never thought of
agree.
it that way. I never thought of it that way. Maybe why is because a sense of my filmmaking style, and cinematically what I look at was explained in a way in the book, so you could actually visualize
Right.
the place. You could actually visualize who these two characters are. But of course, it has to be written very differently. And um, uh, would I write, if I have to write a screenplay, and if I make a movie of Mapping Love, would I write the screenplay? I'm not sure about it.
Mhm.
Maybe I
Right.
will ask someone else who would be really good at it to attempt it. Is
I guess.
because I'm still looking at it as a book, and that's why I think most of us who are avid readers and who are also avid cinema watchers always have this point of view when a book is made into a film, and when a
Exactly what I was going to get at.
and so we have Help, which is a great book, and it was also a film.
Hmm.
We have so many other books like that. We have Wild,
Right.
which is a book and is also
Right.
made into film.
Right.
And when we read, and when we understand and we see the whole world, and then when we go into a movie and when we see that, it's like completely different.
Right.
But that's why the medium is different, and that's why we say that, you need to just make
Right.
sure that what is your medium and what are you working for. So maybe a
Right.
lot of things from the book, of what I've written in Mapping Love, would not be a part of the movie.
Right.
Uh, because
But right. But Ashwini, that's a very interesting point that you brought up, because that was actually what I was getting at. That so one of the interesting things that happens is, as to each medium their own, right? What I personally believe, like, I am a huge fan of Bollywood cinema and reading as well. What I personally feel is that a book kind of gives you the luxury of kind of exploring more senses and engaging with, let's say, if you're a creator, with the person you're presenting your art to. I mean, for example, you could, engage the person's sense of smell, sense of how their skin, like, you can describe, it can be a lot more descriptive as opposed to a movie, which is, well, like a visual medium is very powerful, impactful. But then I mean, I don't know, you would know this much better than I do. Say if you have to communicate smell, right? How do you communicate a scent, or whether it's a good one or a bad one through cinema, right? And you gave an example of Help, and I'm sure there are like a bunch of other movies which are book adaptation and which did really well. Some like Lord of the Rings comes to mind, like a
Yeah,
fantastic
a lot of
adaptation,
books. We have a
right?
whole lot of books
Right.
that are really
but
good.
but
Harry
simultaneously there's
Potter.
also, yeah. But exactly, Harry Potter, like as if you're a Harry Potter fan, you would know this exactly, right? I mean, there is a great class of movies which are well adapted, and then there are movies which evoke really strong emotions among loyalists to the books. Some, like, if you have read the Harry Potter series and like it, when the Goblet of Fire, Harry Potter's name comes out of it, and like the book reads, Dumbledore announced, like the literal sentence is, Harry Potter, Dumbledore said calmly. And the movie depiction has Dumbledore, thundering and like shouting Harry Potter and being very aggressive with Harry, right? And I'm sure that's a creative choice that was made. Well, instead of ambling, I'll come to the point that it's, I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do, and you very aptly put it that you might want someone else to do the screenplay of Mapping Love if it goes down that route. But do you think, to begin with, are adaptations from one form to the other? I mean, the other forms also picked up over the past decade or two, wherein you have, like, books based on movies that have come out, like narrative forms, or like books inspired from it. Do you think art in itself, like, the ideas or the creations are can switch art mediums? Is it a fair thing to put that burden to begin with? Do you think or do you think it's a futile process to kind of, because you yourself mentioned, like, sometimes you feel like a creative thought that you have, it needs to be in a particular medium. So are we doing it a disservice by kind of saying that it can possibly be in another medium as well? Or do you think it's a fair, fluid form of transforming from one to the other?
I think it's a very fair, fluid form transferring from one form to the other, is because, like I said before, it's very important to know what your objective is with an
Hmm.
idea, and it's also important to know that how does the idea lend itself into the medium in which we would really want to write, whether it's a novel or whether we want to write it for a screenplay.
Hmm.
Uh, See, Mapping Love was a book where we could really clearly see it as a screenplay,
Right.
uh, as something which is there. But maybe my next book, Man-Made Matters, would not give me that aspects. And not all books are made into movies. There are
Hmm.
some books which are purely written only for the joy of reading
Right.
a novel, and I think that is pure joy. The books which can be made into a film may sometimes do justice to it, or sometimes may not do justice to it.
Right.
So Sally Rooney's books have been made into a movie, into a
Mm.
web series.
Web series. Yeah.
A Conversation with Friends was
Mm.
made into a web series. Normal People was made. Uh, I personally, I feel that I read the book and I could engage with the book more
Hmm.
and not so much with the what I saw. So, but that's my personal choice, and
Right.
I may be completely wrong about it. It is about what you are reading and what you are adapting into a movie, that's it's an ongoing debate for everyone, is because
Right.
uh, everyone has a different point of view. But the ones who have not read anything and just goes and watches the movie will have a very
Right.
different perspective of. It's a very
Right.
it's a community based thing, right? That
Right.
there are a lot of filmmakers and a lot of
Mm.
movie goers who do not read books.
Right.
Although I would love to encourage the idea of reading books every day,
Right. Right.
but there are people who do not read books. So then, how do you justify that? So I think it's a
Right.
very fluid
But
conversation to
but
have.
Ashwini, do you think like a very
Sorry, I'm just going
cliched,
to cut you
so,
here
sorry.
just to complete my thought process. Is that what about audiobooks? What about talking books?
Right.
So that itself is a medium, a different medium right now. That people who do
Mm-hmm.
not have the patience to read a book or have some issues reading a book because of
Mm-hmm.
eyesight and everything, are now getting into reading, getting
Right.
into reading audio, and podcasts are the next new big thing.
Right.
So how do you justify that? I can make Mapping Love podcast also tomorrow if I want
Right.
to.
Right. But so like my question was, I mean, do you think the cliched ship of thesis argument plays into this? That I mean, obviously, I as much as I would agree with, say, you saying that it's a fluid transformation from one medium to the other, but I mean, it'd be kind of unfair to argue that there's the essence retains and some things changed in the when this change occurs from one medium to the other, right? But then how much of a change can we say is fair till the point that it's a completely different piece of art altogether, right? Like you mentioned, there would be people who haven't read the book who go watch a movie, or and they enjoy the movie or have a certain takeaway from it, right? Do you, and because of the very unique nature in which art is perceived by every individual, even when it's a community viewing, right? Do you think that what we are actually end up looking at is it's not just one piece of art being viewed by millions, but just million pieces of arts being individually taken in by people, and every time we change over from a medium to the other, you're essentially not replicating it but creating a different new form of art.
Yes, of course. Why not? And also, why not? The thing is that when you're adapting a book, the reason why you're adapting a book is because you are finding the core idea interesting, and therefore you're adapting the book.
Right.
For example, Bareily ki Barfi was adapted from this French book called Ingredients of Love, and but the one line idea of the whole book was very nice, and it was about mistaken identity, and I think it was a very important line, but we felt that that was very important. It was set in Paris, everything was very very different, but we adapted it into the Indian sentiments and changed the whole thing. It was just that one thought, that one line idea. We
Right.
st- but we still got the rights of the book, and we adapted it into our form of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very fair that we, without losing the core of the idea of a book. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore right now there are many novelists who also want to write screenplays. I meet so many writers who are novelists,
Right.
and who come to me with their books, and they say that can be adapted into a film. And it also, imagine the amount of storytellers we would have. So basically I have so many storytellers, so many novelists who have written books and who want to make them into movies, and they're ready to even write the screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
And some are really good and would want to write the screenplay on their own. Some don't mind assisting and writing in a group. But the idea is to see as many stories as we can, put it out there. So I think it's very important to make sure that we as creators in a position to look at good ideas, always need to keep in mind that the story ideas can come from anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Sometimes it comes from an article, sometimes it comes from a book, sometimes it comes from a conversations. But we have to keep our eyes and ears open. And the more and more storytellers we have, the more and more ideas are going to get evolved. And it is very important that we encourage, as people, as creators who read books, who understand the medium well, to see what is a possibility of it to go into movies. And if that writer gets a chance to even write a screenplay. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel that it is a very it's almost like a chain reaction, and it is also a community building. And I think that is very important, is because today there'll be one story which is written in Marathi,
Mm-hmm.
and I know how to read Marathi, but there will be a lot of other people who would have not even read that book, is because they do not know how to read the language.
Mm-hmm.
But that book has been translated into English, and there are thousands of people reading that book now,
Right.
or Bengali or Marathi or Oriya. So I think it's the way everyone is making sure. So when I read that book in English,
Mm-hmm.
something about that book which I really like,
Yeah.
which I would have never read if it was in another language, because I don't understand the language to read. And when I
Right.
read it in English, I feel that, oh my God, this is something which I can really adapt into a movie, is because this is something which people need to know.
Right.
Your objective and what your purpose is if that is very clear. So imagine one story of a person who has written it in a language which people who are not associated with the language doesn't understand, but that is written in a it's been translated into a language which
Which.
can be understood, and then
Right.
just people like you and me. Isn't
Right.
that beautiful?
Yeah, it
And
is. It absolutely is.
then on screen, you just see adapted from the book.
Right. Correct.
And it is so nice to even see right now, even in all the big award categories across the world, there's a separate section called adapted screenplay.
Yes. That's
There's a
that's
reason
right.
why it is called adapted. So yeah.
So, Ashwini, it's actually great that you mentioned this idea. Well, that you can get ideas from everywhere, because that kind of leads us towards the last question, towards Ashwini the writer, before we jump towards Ashwini the reader, right? So, and it's actually going to be a little interesting to hear your take on it, because till now, I largely the people I talk to are mostly, they don't engage with other mediums. They are just writers. Maybe some work in the ad film industry here and there, right? What I wanted to know was, what's your creative process, right? Like, because you largely, I mean, I know for a fact that you've worked with nonfiction in movies as well, like when you're making documentaries or short films. But as far as I'm aware, in terms of penning down a book, the Mapping Love's the only fiction book that you've penned down. So, I mean, I do understand there's a distinction when it comes to, people creating fiction versus non-fiction. Non-fiction's a more structured, researched approach, right? But within fiction, mostly I've heard people are divided largely into two schools. There are one who are, fans of the structured approach, that, I'll get up in the morning like 6 to 8, I'll sit and write, and I need my space, I need clarity and everything. Kudos to that. And then there's one of those which whom I call the Hemingway types, right? Like, they let the pen flow, and like whenever inspiration strikes them, whether it's 3 in the morning and you have to get up, and you just need to let it flow out of you. So, who is like, what's your style of working, and why do you think uh you end up doing, why does it work for you? Like, are you one of those impulsive people, like, you have an idea, you just need to write it down, you read an article, you just put it down somewhere? Or is it just, okay, I'll wake up, go to my desk at 10 o'clock in the morning, and like start researching and writing, or whatever, however it goes?
Okay, so one of my favorite time is basically to whenever I pick up a book.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter all the famous writers, or whether they're famous, they're not famous.
Mm-hmm.
It's destiny, and some people are not famous, but their books are really good.
Right.
So I'm a very curious person about how people write and how people create.
Okay.
This I think today in the morning I was just looking at some artist studio, how they have the artist, and how artists paint, and what is their daily schedule like in the MoMA site.
Mm.
So I think for me those things are very, very important. So for me, so when I usually go and say, before reading a book, actually, the first thing when I'm reading a book, and then I'll go back to my thing. The first thing when I read a book is go to really the back, and I go to the back and I read the thank you.
Right.
Okay, for me that is very important. That what is the thought process of the writer who has been writing this book for years, and finally
Absolutely.
he sees it out. So I read the thank you. I see the acknowledgements first.
Right.
After I see the acknowledgements, I go to online, and I just see writing routine of this person. That gives me, I really like that. I
Right.
do that.
Right.
So whether it is Chitra Divakarani ji, or it is Sally Rooney, or it is recently I just went Daniel Steele. I was
Mm.
seeing how she writes, and what's her routine like. And then you of course have the best authors in the world. Their
Right.
that book, right? The schedule, the routine of the best writers.
That just went.
Or whether it is anyone. So, uh, who I was reading recently, some book I picked up, and there, of course, Murakami is always
Right.
there. Murakami has written a whole book.
Spoke about.
Yes, so I would really recommend, if everyone hearing this recording today, I would really recommend for all writers and creators. Doesn't matter even if you're a writer or not a writer, to read Murakami's How to Become a Novelist book. I think it is one of the best books. I bought almost like 10, 15 books, and I've given it to all my friends who are writers,
Right.
directors. I've just gifted them, is because I think it's one book which everyone should just read. It is so, so beautiful. So Murakami in that writes, how does he write and what does he do, and what are his quirks in terms of
Right.
how he's writing and what he doesn't like and what he likes. So I'm a big fan of Murakami. But although I cannot follow his 365 days here when he started writing a book to say that it's going to be like morning 6 o'clock and then run, then coming back and then
Yeah.
working. But it's very nice to know how people write, the
Hmm.
different ways which people write. And sometimes it's very surprising also, is because you think that you're writing continuously, but there are a lot of novelists who are also professors, who are also parents, who are also have other jobs to do and are still writing. So
Right.
I'm also very curious to know is because how do they
Hmm.
so much?
Right.
Like this, I read this author whose book I really liked. It is everywhere uh, sorry, what is that, that gamer, the two gamers who fall in love with each other?
Two gamers who fall in love with each other.
Everywhere something, it's, I forgot.
Everything, everywhere, all at once. But
No,
that's a
no,
movie.
that's a movie. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll tell you
Okay. Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you at the end. Maybe we'll just
Yeah.
this again. So yeah, if you ask me my routine, there are days when I just cannot write,
Right.
and there are days when I will suddenly get up and I'll feel like, oh my god, now I need to write. There are days when when I'm traveling, I would just type something on my phone.
Right.
But mostly, if I have anything, I just write it in my book. I have a diary. I have like book for every. I think I have books for everything. So one movie, I have one book. If I have an idea, I have one book. I have now a book for my next book. So
Mm.
basically, I have books for everything. But and that's why my bag is always heavy, is because I carry 3 4 books at one time, not knowing that when am I going to what is going to happen. But sometimes I do see we all don't have the luxury to just give our 100% completely devoted to the book.
Absolutely.
And let's be honest about it. There are a lot of other things we need to do, and also other distractions which I have. For me, I have realized at the moment I completely say that okay, now I'm going to start writing. Then I really need to switch off from everything. I
Right.
cannot have even like an ounce of, even if it is 2 hours or 3 hours, I need to be completely off everything, which means
Right.
even I tell my family and I need to tell my friends and my co-workers that I'm not available for the next 2 3 hours, so do not call me. That
Right.
happens also when we're writing a screenplay. It's very clear that I tell in the office also, writing D&D.
Okay. No,
Because what
that.
happens is that the moment one thought starts in, then you're already there. And I also try finishing all my errands when I start writing. I think that's because I am a mother and have like 10,000 other things happening. So I always, because I have realized this, and this has happened I don't know how many times. The moment I start writing, they would be like, can we order something? Can this happen? This, some bill has to come, some sabji wala has to be paid. It only happens when I'm writing. Before that,
Of
nothing
course.
happens. So basically, so for me, it is about that. But yes, I do take, what happens is that for me, when I'm writing, I start growing the idea in my head for a very,
Right.
very,
Right.
and I keep writing notes. I'm a
Right.
very writing note, very old school. I keep writing my notes. My pen all has to be very, like very correct and everything. And once
Right.
I finish that,
Hmm.
then I directly get onto the laptop, because I just feel
Right.
that you can't keep writing and writing and
In
writing.
editing.
It doesn't. Then my thoughts start flowing when I'm writing, when I'm typing,
Right.
and that time when I know that this is the brim, this
Hmm.
is this is now you have to write. Then my schedule is very. I'm a super disciplined person. So then,
Right.
if I know that I need my day starts by 10 o'clock, and I'm not a morning person or a really late night person or nothing like that. But I
Right.
create my own discipline. So if I know that I have to leave, I have my yoga and my everything and my other things which I need to take care of my health also at the
Hmm.
same time. So then I make sure that I get up in the morning and I write, and then
Hmm.
I go and do everything else,
Right.
or I finish everything and then go. Actually, I'll go to a cafe and, like, switch off my phone and just write for 2 hours and then
Right.
go back home. Or I'll write late in the night, but not very late in the night. I'm not a, I, if I have a chance, I'll just sleep at like 10 o'clock and wake up the next day at 10 o'clock. So,
But Ashwini, I was so glad to hear the start of your answer and also the rest, but like super glad to hear the first bit because that's largely the reason why this podcast was born. Okay. Like as an avid reader, I'm exactly like you in that sense that when I read a novel, like I'm very curious to know about the author, like because that changes the way I'm perceiving the novel. And like now over the past 5 7 years it started perceiving the way I'm actually viewing a film also, right? Like I mean, what is where the director's coming from, what's this is this script writer, I read this about him or her, this is their journey, and that's something that reflects in the work that they're doing. And same for novels and novelists, and largely it came from that. There were a lot of authors who I liked, whom I couldn't, when I googled what their writing schedule or uh, life is about, I couldn't find much, and that's how I ended up making the podcast. And it's very heartening to hear all of this, right? Because I think and because a lot of my listeners are not just like readers but also aspiring writers, and I think it's very heartwarming to kind of hear that there's, I mean, as disciplined as you get when you have the ideas, they're also an acknowledgement of these practical difficulties that you face in life, and the fact that you have other things to do and there are other things that will run into it. It kind of, because as ordinary human beings, we always tend to glorify our heroes or people we look up to, or people, at least even in professionally, like someone who's, you're successful in, as a creator, you're quite successful. So anyone who's aspiring to be a creator, whether it's a director or a writer, will always have, oh, maybe Ashwini ma'am's always, she has such great movies and how does she do it? And it's, I think, really heartwarming to realize that you have the same struggles as every other person does, right? कि घर पे बिल भरने की दिक्कत आपको भी है जितनी उसी तीसरे दूसरे इंसान को है. So I think that is a very interesting thing to know about and writer always. But I think I'm going to take a step back and I just want to ask you a few questions about you as a reader, right? Because from the conversation, it kind of reaffirms my really long held belief that most writers and most creators for that matter have like kind of trace their creativity back to books or like at least some other art form which this thing, right? But for art writers, I think it's kind of like practice to read books. The more books you read, the better you get at your craft. It's kind of honing your skills,
yeah.
right? So I mean, I know it's I can fairly assume, but I still want to ask the question. You are a voracious reader, I'm guessing. But how did you get into reading? If you could take us through that journey, were your parents were you always like a avid reader as a kid, or did your parents kind of get you into reading? And how did this evolution happen?
So, both my parents, my mother's a teacher. She was a principal of a school. My father was a professor of plant pathology. He did
Hmm.
his PhD. So, reading was always a very good habit at home. But
Right.
I would say that it would have not been like, that we always, obviously you don't have that kind of money to just go and keep buying books. So then we used to go to the Raddiwala and pick up the
Hmm.
second-hand books which would come if someone else is sold, and then you buy it
Yeah.
and you read it. But my yes, we have been a family. Actually, I owe this to my mother's older sister,
Okay.
my Masi, my
Hmm.
aunt, who was an avid reader, and she introduced me to Reader's Digest. I think at that point of time,
Right.
I'm way older now, and at that, I think this is in the 80s where she introduced me to Reader's Digest, where it had this foreign one volumes, and you had different stories there, and then you had the American short stories. Because I think that was what it was, and then of course you had your Tinkle Champak and all, but those were different stories altogether. But yes, we did have that. After that, I think when you get into college, and I'm from Sophia Polytechnic, I did my art direction from there, commercial arts. So
Hmm.
that story and reading just becomes a habit there, is because you do need to go into the library and keep picking up books and seeing what is there. The actual reading habit picked up actually when I was in Sophia Polytechnic, and not before that, is because
Hmm.
peer groups, what happens, how everyone functions, that itself becomes like a huge definition of how you form in
Right.
your life. And I think I'm inculcating the same habit in my children also. where my son likes books which are way different than what my daughter likes, but
Right.
he likes more graphic novels. He likes more reading which is like quick, whereas my
Mm.
daughter loves her Harry Potters, and she'll keep reading, watching the movie again, reading the book, and it just goes on and
Right.
on. But I think it's up to us on how we put in the idea of reading is necessary for everyone,
Right.
and also reading any kind. So but then incident happened, then you start subscribing for all these magazines. I still remember there was there's this one magazine called the Little Magazine, which
Okay.
used to be there, which was published. And
Okay.
I used to order that, and it was nice to just keep reading and seeing the different kinds of stories which used to come from various different writers and authors.
Right.
Of course, it was all the names which we all of us know about, and that's the books we used to read. But then, the more and more you get evolved and involved, and it was so and that's stepping back to just recently. I just gone to Kitab Khana in Bombay,
Mm. Right.
and also it was very beautiful, is because my daughter told me that I need to go to a bookstore. I need to go to a bookstore. Please take me. So I went with her to Kitab Khana because I feel that's a very beautiful bookstore.
It is.
And obviously, as a storyteller, you kind of observe things, and I see three old people
Hmm.
in the 70s who are discussing books which is of a translation,
Okay.
and they're discussing that, oh, have you read this thing, or have you read this, though this is something which I really like, I think next one you should pick up is this. These are kind of conversations. This is from an old group. The
Right.
other group is youngsters who
Right.
are standing and discussing all the new ones, the
Right.
new books which have come in, and discussing whether they should first buy the volume 2 and then go to volume 1, or first they should buy volume 1 and then go to volume 2 and 3 and 4.
Right.
I like that. I like the idea of seeing the youngsters of our country interested in reading books. And I think it is very, very important that people like you, and somewhere people like me, start really encouraging the idea of having book clubs for teenagers, having book clubs for young
Right.
adults, because we as adults now think that, we don't have the time, who would want to be like discussing books.
Right.
But it's very important that the youngsters of our country discuss, the like we discuss movies, they need to discuss books also.
Absolutely. I think I think that's a very important thing that you've just pointed out, because unfortunately, people like to demean a lot of the technological advances we made, like, that the internet's taking a lot away from us. While it might be doing that, it's bringing a lot to the table. But one really unfortunate thing that's happened again over the past couple of decades is, it's not a novel idea. The fact that there's the declining attention span that people have, like, people just don't want to put in, like, dedicate that amount of time to one single activity. And in that sense, books are the biggest losers for this in this scenario,
Yeah.
because they require that dedicated time and uh to complete the process, as we might put it, right? And i think I think it's very, very important to kind of, the kind of depth that a book kind of brings to the table is something unparalleled. And I don't just mean non-fiction, right? I know a lot of people who say, when they talk about, you should read non-fiction because it adds to your life in terms of your knowledge. But I truly believe that fiction is something that sharpens you much, much more than non-fiction can ever do. It kind of gives you a more holistic development. But actually takes me towards some of couple of my last questions for you before I let you go. It's a very cliched question to ask, but I'm going to try and frame it in a very different way. So, I am, as a reader, I never ask anyone for their favorite books. Right? That kind of, I think that's a crime, to be honest. But what I do really would want to know is, I'm pretty sure throughout your life there would be some books which you read which really impacted you. They might not necessarily be like your favorite book or your go-to book, but then books that have, like, really changed the way you look at things, or kind of made you perceptive, or changed your worldview on things, or made you operate in a particular way. So would you can you share a few of those, if any, like, books with us?
There are a lot of books, and some are very
Right.
philosophical, some are very spiritual, and some
Right.
are only because the writing is so good.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ask me which are the, I won't say there are any favorite books, is because for me it is basically
Of
depending on
course.
my mood, I go back to something which I want to just reread.
Right.
So just recently I again from Kitab Khana, because I love the cover so much and I love the way they have a new cover. It's a hardbound kind of thing. I picked up Fountainhead again.
Oh.
Yep, and I just wanted to read it, and I felt that, you know what, so nice. I'll have Fountainhead, and I
Mm.
will have, like, it's a
Right.
hardbound, and and I have Atlas Shrugged also. So basically, I
Right.
have the books, and both the books are beautifully.
Beautiful. Right.
I wanted to read Fountainhead purely because it is beautifully designed, and I wanted to go back to the idea of, evolution of a person who was very
Right.
ambitious. I wanted to reread in terms of why did and write like that at that point
Mm-hmm.
of time. So it is that. Or I love going to Murakami and I will read Kafka on
Of
the show.
course.
I will read Running.
Mm.
I now my latest is Novelist. So basically I'm going to Murakami and even if I can't open the book, I would just go on to online and just see some of his favorite quotes and
Good. Right.
just feel good about it. So that is there. Another author whom I personal favorite is Anuradha Roy.
Oh
Uh,
my God. I
yeah,
love her.
I really like her. I really like her, and I keep reading about her, how she writes, what does she do, and of course
Yeah.
she stays
Raniket.
Raniket and with her dogs and when I look at her when I look at her, and I've heard too many of her conversations online, and
Mm-hmm.
she is so calm and she is so. I think one very important thing as creators. From especially for people who are thriving to do good work is to only keep doing good work and not worry about the results.
Right.
I think that is something which I have learned through years in
Right.
whatever medium I'm working on. And it is so important to just do your best and just leave it, is
Mm-hmm.
because, and that also Murakami says in his book Novelist, so
Mm-hmm.
he says that where you just have to keep working, because in spite of him doing like he's one of the best writers this world has, and still
Mm-hmm.
there will be so many people who will say that his book is not good. So
Right.
that's what he has written in his book, and I would really urge you to read it. But for me, when I every time I look at her, I just feel so nice,
Right.
and I hear her talk on
Mm.
things, and her knowledge and how she writes, I think is something which I really like. The other authors, so for me, I think it's not more about the books; it's more about the authors.
Not. Right.
Then I love Chitra Divakarani, and for me, her writing uh, is something which is outstandingly beautiful. The way she crafts characters. So sometimes I go back to her writing, especially right now. I have read Independence twice.
Okay.
Is because for me to go back to her characters to see why she wrote something like this, and how she literally jumped, years, and what was the core of why would someone associate any reader or any person who has nothing to do with storytelling, who has nothing to do with writing, who's not a creator, who's something completely maybe she's a homemaker, or he's a scientist but still
Right.
likes to read.
Right.
So Chitra's books does that to us. It gets back to a core. Then, of course, I love all spiritual books. For me, I
Mm-hmm.
just picked up Ramana Maharshi's book. For me, Silence really is a book which I go back to. Right now, I'm reading a book. I don't know whether you saw it on my Instagram. So I have a hashtag called No Makeup Books by
Mm-hmm.
Bareily. And the recent book which I'm continuing to read right now is because it's so interesting. Is called Quiet.
Okay.
The idea of being quiet, it's basically the whole thing of introverts, extroverts, and ambiverts, and how
Right.
people are, and how most of the creators are actually introverts, and what happens there. And it's very interesting to know, is because and also most of the creators, after being an introvert, need to be an ambivert, or closely an extrovert, is because they even have to go and sell their books, or they have to
Right.
they have to be there for their promotion of their creating whatever
Right.
they created. So there's a very nice um, uh, thing. And also the other book which I keep going back to, I bought all the books on emotional intelligence.
Okay.
For me, that subject really excites me, and I really like reading more on the psychology of human beings and why they behave in a certain way. Or I think that's a core of all of us as creators, right? We write stories, and
Right.
of course, even if you're writing history or even if you're writing something which is magic realism, the core has always been psychology,
Emotional.
of the human uh, emotion of any character. So for
Right.
me, that also excites me a lot. Yeah, so I can read anything. Ask me, except horror, which I cannot. And I kind of, I kind of, I tried because the cover was beautiful. In Oxford, I felt like I was like a part of Oxford, and I went and I saw some bookstores, and I went and picked up a whole lot of books from there, and I found this book called Ice, which was
Okay.
really, the cover of the book was very nice, very different, very cut out kind of thing. So I picked it up, then I realized it's a science
So,
fiction.
oh,
Yeah, but I read it.
okay.
I wanted to read it, so
Yeah.
I.
I'm so glad that you mentioned Anuradha Roy and Chitra Banerjee, because like Chitra Banerjee Tiwakaruni, at least is like a lot more people know of her work and like read her works, but not as much as Anuradha Roy. I I've read almost all of both. In fact, both of them have been on the podcast earlier. But
Oh,
yeah, Anuradha's All the Lives We've Never Lived, sorry, was something that absolutely blew me away. I'd read Sleeping in Jupiter and stuff before, but it actually floored me about how perfectly how one of those cliched lines. This is why we read fiction at all. Kind of very beautifully applied there. But we're running out of time, so I'm just going to quickly wrap this up, right? So one thing which I always ask my guests, right, and it's the question I had mentioned to you before as well. I believe that in today's day and age, like writers have somewhat started becoming, like thankfully so and rightfully so, celebrities in their own right, because of how internet and social media exist, that you can keep tab and track and like, engage with them, and on top of the fact that you're a director, a fairly popular one at that, uh, it kind of comes with its own of you know misgivings that a lot of your personal life is kind of exposed to people, right? Like people get to know a lot about you. But would you like to share like one part of you which maybe like my listeners wouldn't have heard of, or my viewers wouldn't have seen, wouldn't have known about you? Maybe a part of you that you would like to share with us, which might, I don't know, just get to know you better as a writer.
I think one of the most important thing for me is to know when to switch off.
Right.
And it is very important that you do not go into extremes, that you are like completely isolated, because you are made because of your audiences, you are made because of your readers, and you
Mm-hmm.
write because you want gratification. You make movies or you create something because you want other people to see. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how you evolve as a human being, as a creator. So one of the most important things for me, it is that when I'm writing or when I'm creating, I need to switch off very clearly. And I am a mindful meditation teacher, although I do not teach now. But during the pandemic, I was taking a lot of meditation classes for my writers, which actually helped them, is because I did feel that some form of meditation and some form of uh, collective consciousness in yourself is very important, to know your core of why you are writing or creating something which you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very important. I do feel that meditation becomes a very important part of our lives as a creator, and also to switch off a lot of noise around you, which can hamper your thought process. So for me, that is very important. So yes, I meditate every day, and I want to learn more about it, and I can switch off also very easily. So if I do not want to be on social media for some time, I'm not going to be there. And I also, something which I like to do is that I, every time when I'm writing,
Mhm.
I want to clear off everything in my head before I start writing or before I start creating, whether I'm making a movie, when I
Mhm.
start that, or when I'm writing a book, or when I'm writing a screenplay, or even when I'm doing my art.
Mhm.
Art I do now only because I started off as an art director. So art I
Mhm.
do now only because, just makes you feel very good. But I need to clear my head. So when I
Right.
say clear my head is basically delete all the unwanted messages on your phone, delete all the mails which come in, then unsubscribe for a lot of things which you are subscribed but then you don't
You
need
don't
them
read. Right.
more. Then so Leo Babu, his books really helped me a lot. His writing really helps me a lot on the whole idea of mindfulness, of how do you deal with your life mindfully. I need my cupboards cleaned completely. Like I so when I'm writing, or when I start directing, I need to know exactly what is where and what is behind, so that I can just concentrate on writing.
Right.
So for
Right.
me that is very, very important. Yeah. So I like I'm a little have a little OCD with cleanliness. So for me, even the table has to be clean, everything has to be in the right place, and the head has to be.
Right. And it kind
I
of
cannot
takes
have any, and that's a process.
no, but your process sounds like taking clearing your head to an all new level. Like cupboards have to be cleaned and tables. Like it's I like the approach, but it actually makes sense, right? Like I mean, if you're a person who has an OCD about this, like kind of an OCD as you phrased it, you would be distracted. It's not that thought doesn't need to run through your head when you're working. Like I like the approach that you put in there.
I don't want anything to trouble me. So even if it is something which is, for example, something which I spoke to a friend, and maybe that he or she have not answered me the question, or I have not answered them, so I'll just quickly finish. Basically, I just finish off all my. It is like, when I don't know whether you've done, and of course, I go for a silence course every year
Okay.
to the Art of Living Ashram. So
Right.
I go for a silence course, and I think that really helps me because being in silence, being with your own thoughts, without reading or without having any form of communication with anything else apart with your own self, I think is a very beautiful form of knowing exactly where you are, and what is your purpose. The moment you know what your purpose of in life is, and the moment you know why are you writing this, what is your purpose. See, some will write only because they just want to have some fun, and they like writing, but most of the creators want to write, or want to direct, or want to create some form of art, is because they have a certain vision that they do want to do this thing. Even doesn't matter, even if they're fashion designers, every creator in any form of art have some vision, and therefore they make whatever they envision. It is very important for us as creators that you need to have a purpose. Like you talking to me right now, you have a purpose
Right.
of why you want to have this podcast, or why you want to have this conversation with me. So I think that is very important. And the moment you know what your purpose is, then I think everything else just falls into place.
Right.
That was enough of Gyan for today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashwini, for doing this. This is an absolutely lovely interview. I supremely enjoyed myself. Thank you for joining us on the Kitabi Karwan podcast. We absolutely loved having you. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please check us out on all our social media platforms. We're available across all podcasting platforms on YouTube, on Instagram. You can find us at the rate Kitabi Karwan on Instagram, or just search Kitabi Karwan on Google or a platform of your choice and you'll find us. We carry out Instagram lives, giveaways, we talk about books, we talk to bibliophiles, talk to authors, and basically try and create a reader's world through all of our platforms. Do check us out, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.